Five,
Yep.
four, three. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another New Block Nerds podcast. I am your host, Chris, aka Prince, with the homie DarRon, aka Medic Grizzly here. DarRon, how you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's been a good week.
Good.
Me and the wife celebrating 2 years of marriage today. So,
Bravo, bravo.
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. She has not killed me yet. So,
Hey, you're
you
doing
know,
well. You're doing good.
yeah, I'm doing all right. I still have a pulse. You know what I mean? So that's good. That's
Check with
good.
me in
That's
about
good.
4 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyways, yeah, I wanted to get started. So last week we covered a Game of Thrones, the prologue for Game of Thrones. And this week we're jumping into Bran 1. I think this is a shorter chapter than the prologue, but I think it has a lot of exposition in it.
Okay.
You get a lot of setting notes about like where we are in the world and like what this world is. We got a little taste of it in the prologue, but now you're obviously into a character who's going to be a major player going forward, and so it's short, but it's packed with a lot of stuff. I think it's interesting too that like the very first POV chapter we get is Bran. I don't think.
You're
think
foreshadowing.
that says something.
Yeah, you're foreshadowing about the conclusion of what everything is going to. So yeah, I definitely
Right.
agree with you. I was actually pretty impressed with it being so short but very compact, to the point that you actually felt like you actually can visually see everything. Like what Winterfell is now. You felt like the snow, how it was a long winter, how Bran is only 7 at this time when things are starting to take place. There's a great part of seeing like this the overall breakdowns. He's of age to see what his father actually does and
Right.
why he's a king of the North.
Right. Or Warden of the North.
Warden of the North. I'm up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean the chapter opens up with Bran and some of his family riding out to see a man beheaded, who we later learn is Garrett from the prologue.
Yeah.
Because they talk about his frostbitten ears and stuff like that, so we know it's Garrett. Again, like talking about like some of the setting, like you said, Bran mentions that it's the 9th year of summer, and he's 7 years old. So right off the bat, you understand. Okay, the seasons are not.
They're not
how
normal.
our seasons work,
Yeah,
right?
not
like,
at all.
This is 9 years of summer. Okay, so you get a little bit more exposition here. You get Bran reminiscing, or not reminiscing, but like recalling when he was talking to Robb and Jon about who this man was. Robb thought he was maybe a wildling loyal to Mance Rayder, the King Beyond the Wall. So that's a little bit of exposition, because obviously Mance Rayder is a major player later on in the story.
I think it is. It also gives people like an insight that there's more going on. Like we
absolutely.
got on the prequel, it was like, yo, okay, we're not even talking about real people. Like, they were dead, they're alive. And this particular chapter, we're talking about, oh, so you're a warden. He says the King Robb, but there is someone else who's claiming to be something else beyond the wall. So there's a bunch of different territories with different personalities, and everybody wants their cake. Everybody wants a slice of what's going on.
Right. Yeah. And I, like you said, like it's giving you a little bit more of the setting, right? So like you said, he mentions King Robert, but Robb's talking about this king beyond the wall. So it's like, okay, obviously the wall, and we get a little taste of that in the prologue of the wall is there to keep certain people out.
Yeah.
Most importantly, some things out. But I love some of the dialogue in this and some of the inner thoughts that Bran has.
Okay.
Where he's talking about how his father, he had taken off his father's face and donned the face of Lord Stark. Of Winterfell.
Yeah.
I love that. And later on, you see that a lot when, spoiler for anyone who hasn't read the books or watched the show. Later on, when Robb becomes king in the North, Catelyn has those same thoughts.
Yes.
Often, where she looks at Robb and she's like, he was no longer a boy. He took off the face of Robb and put on the King in the North's face. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's business time now.
And I also love how Ned, Lord Stark, was basically, you're of age of knowing what I'm doing, but do you know why I'm doing this?
Right. Yeah, we'll get to that, because that's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite things in this whole book is just, and I think that's why we end up rooting for the Starks, right? Because they seem like people. They seem like good people.
Yes.
I mean, like they seem like people who are honorable, or however much honor you can have in a world like this.
There's simple folks that just want things, like they said, they're of the old ways. They just
Right.
want things to be done the correct way. If you have the obligation, we'll consider the oath breaker. So if you don't decide to keep your word on something, there's a consequence to it.
Right. Right,
Other,
right, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So you know they're talking to the guy, and then you know we get a little introduction of Ice, which is the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Stark, and I love the way that they describe this one. I mean, this is a big fucking sword.
bruh,
It's described as wide across as a man's hand and taller even than Rob. And remember, in this story, Ned is 35, Bran
yes.
mentions, right? So he's
Yep.
obviously a man grown. They even talks about like having white in his beard. So 35 is like middle aged.
And Rob's 14. Rob and Joe.
Right? Rob is 14,
Yeah,
right? So
14.
he's officially a man grown kind of in this world, right? And the sword is as wide as a grown man's hand and taller than Rob, a 15-year-old boy.
Just think about that. And it's like said, and it was dark as smoke. Like
Right.
his name is Ice, and this is dark as smoke. Like the visual, this it. Oh my
Yeah.
god!
Yeah.
If you know me, you know me. I love comics, comic books, and like just be able to just engage in like everything about visually art. Like it's just amazing. Like the wordplay was insane.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they did a good job in the show of like portraying the actual sword. Like it's massive,
pretty large.
It's massive. I mean, like when Theon in the show actually like when they unsheath the sword for the first time, it's like this isn't something you just you carry around. Like someone else has to hold the scabbard for you while you pull it out. Like it's,
Yeah,
anyways.
Judgment Day. Yes, it's going down. When you see that, it's a problem.
And so, like another part I like, and it might be kind of corny, but I always like when Game of Thrones does their like their pronouncements of like titles.
Okay.
So like Ned, like before he's about to behead this guy, he's like, you know, in the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals and the Roynar and the First Men. I love that. I love all those titles.
Like
I
tell
love
me,
these
like
titles.
yo, you this, you this, you this. Like yo,
Yeah.
talk your talk.
Right. But again, I mean, even that, as cool as it is, it's a little bit more exposition, right? It's telling
Yes.
you, you know, not just the titles, but it's giving you a little bit of the history of Westeros, right? It talks about, you know, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, all this other kind of stuff, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North. So it kind of tells you, okay, this guy is obviously close to the wall, right? The wall is north. He's the Lord up there, so he's running everything up there. So I like that, you know, like John kind of encourages Bran not to look away. And it's
I'm
kind
gonna
of like,
ask you that. How did you feel about when they described? They said Rob was more muscular, but John was stronger. Like, how did you feel about that? Is like this them trying to describe those two, and then seeing how Rob cared about Bran, making sure that yo don't look away. It's okay. He's Bob's gonna know if you do look away.
So that's very interesting that you bring that up because it's very interesting that like when they describe Rob and John here and in the contrast between them, Rob, Bran is thinking has their mom's coloring, so
Yes.
he looks more like a Tully, right? But when he describes John, John looks like a traditional Stark. I mean, like
Yes.
like him and Ned have the same eyes. Like they're built the same. They have similar hair colors. I mean,
And
John's
that's
hair
what
is black,
and that's
where
what I
Ned's is
want to
brown,
know.
but-
And that's what I want to know how you felt about it, because like I didn't realize like just the games that were being played in the actual storyline so early. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think it's. I think I'm trying not to like get into too
You don't
much
have to. I
foreshadow,
just
but
want to know how you felt. Yeah.
yeah, it says a lot about John, I think, especially given that he's the one that's kind of like talking to Bran, and you kind of like you get some dialogue from John that lets you know that like, you know, he's a little bit more mature and pays attention a little bit more than like some of the other kids.
There's a quote at the end when we get to it.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So, you know, we find out a little bit more exposition about like John. We find out that he's a bastard, right? He's 14 years old, so he's a little younger than Rob. And according to Bran, he is, an old hand at justice, right? So again, going back to what you were saying earlier about, Bran is 7, and this is his first trip that he's taken where he's seeing a man be beheaded or seeing the king's
Yes.
justice done is how they describe it, right?
And he was so
John's
focused on the
14,
blood. Yeah, John's been
right?
around.
John's 14, so he's old hand at justice. So like this is
Like,
Tuesday.
I'm used to it, bro. Like, what's
Yeah,
going on? Yeah.
yeah,
And they mentioned how Bran, there's a quote in the line, it was like, the blood spread out like red summer wine. It just tells you how,
yeah.
like, he was...
Talk about how like the snow like drank the blood. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And,
that's
as
the
a
thing
kid,
like,
seeing that,
yeah, and that's the thing that George does like with his writing. Like he's so very vivid in like how he writes things. Like he makes inanimate object. He describes inanimate objects with so much life
yes.
that like it's so very vivid, and that's why like these books are so hard to like put down because like you can't turn away from it because it's just so gripping and so
When
vivid.
you are, like, reading something and you feel that you can touch it, when you feel you can smell it, like, those are
Yeah.
things that, like, wow, like, you really
Like I'm
wrote
reading
that.
this and I can close my eyes and like picture what all of this looks like.
That's greatness.
Yeah,
That's greatness
yeah,
right there.
yeah. So going back to your other point about we were talking about John kind of being a little bit more maybe mature than him. I like this bit here when they were talking about when Rob was like, oh, the deserter, he died bravely, and John was like, nah, this guy was dead of fear.
Yes.
Right, so it's kind of giving you a little early difference of how like John and Rob read people a little bit differently, and later on, like I think there's a quote in the book. I think it might be Benjen who says that bastards grow up faster than trueborn children, right? Because they have to,
Wow.
right? Because he's John's.
You're uncomfortable. You got to make sure you got to do different things.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just get by just on your name because you have no name.
So let me ask you a question then. So we see how Rob felt about it. We see how John felt about it. And then you see them run off to the snow, like trying to race each other. And then Lord Stark pulls out the brand. And we'll get to the part where I think you're going to, where it's like, and Bran said basically that Rob said this, John said this. How did you feel about how that response was?
I thought it was great. Number one, when Bran was saying, Rob said this, John said this. Ned, I think, is such a great father because like he didn't tell Bran what to think, right? He literally asked Bran, "Well, what do you think? Do you think he was afraid, or do you think he died brave? Like, which one do you think it is, right?" And Bran's like, well, can he be brave if he's afraid? And Ned says something so great, and he's like, "That's the only time where you can be brave,
Absolutely.
is when you're afraid."
And it says
Right?
the balance that Ned is at. So you have the way basically left side, the right side, and you have the warden, the lord, the head of the household, and then seeing how he can blend both sides and have a common ground and visually see that.
Right. And he gets more into it, right, about why it is that he's doing what he's doing, right? And Bran talks about, well, King Robert has a headsman, and he's like, yeah, he does, but we're different up here, okay? And I love that saying, the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
Yes.
He said you should, if you're gonna sentence someone to death, you owe it to them to look them in the eyes and hear their final words. And if you can't do that,
Then that person maybe shouldn't die. Right there.
and I thought that was so great. And I think again, it's stuff like this is why we cheer for the Starks early on.
Yeah.
Because we feel like they have this sense of honor, this sense of like justice and righteousness, right? Even with Rob later on, when he has to do some things where it's just like, oh, this is going to be bad for your cause, but Rob is like, I got to do this. I got to do this, and it's got to be by my hand.
The moral compass is definitely live and well in the Stark household,
Right.
versus some that may in the kingdom they'll do different things as far as like being spiteful or trying to take advantage of whatever situation they can. And their household is, I can do that, but that's not right. So we're going to do things the right way.
Right. And again, that's why we love them. That's why we love the Starks. But anyways, yeah. So getting on to the Direwolf pups. John and Rob discover the pups.
Hmm.
Um, Theon mentions how they haven't seen a dire wolf on this side of the wall for like 200 years, right? So again,
Yeah.
it's little tidbits like that of like, okay, we haven't seen the others for a long time,
Hmm.
right? Presumably,
It's
given
been
given
9 years
just
of summer, right? So it's like,
right,
what's going on?
right. So it's just again, it's just giving you a little bit more exposition about like the world. Um, and they discover that like the mom obviously is dead,
Hmm.
but she still gave birth to all these pups, and they find the antler in the throat, which
Yes.
is obviously a clear foreshadowing,
Yeah.
to the conflict between the Starks
When
and
you
the
first read
Baratheons,
that,
Lannisters.
you overlook it. Like it's
Yeah,
okay, but then when you
yeah,
read it later, it's like,
yeah, yeah,
yo, that's
yeah,
crazy. Well, let
yeah.
me ask you a
Which is
question.
crazy. And like, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought. I asked you a question about the
I was
visual.
gonna say it's great that like when Ned pulls the antler out,
Yes.
everyone like gets silent and it's just kind of like looking around. It's almost like George is trying to tell us that
Yeah.
like, hey, this is gonna be a fucking problem later, maybe.
It makes you think that George wrote the ending first and then went back and said, I'm gonna put this here, I'm gonna put a little seed over here. I'm
Right.
gonna go ahead and blend and mix it all together.
He knew where he was going the entire
The
time.
entire time, and
Yeah,
as
there
an
was never any
audience,
doubt.
you're
Yeah,
reading it like, oh, it's an antler, it's no big deal. No, that's a huge freaking deal.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's a
nine,
clear foreshadowing.
but also I'm gonna tell you how the North is, right? So you have 9 years of summer, right? 9 years of
Hmm.
summer, and it says that the dire wolf was knee deep in snow. That they actually had to walk up there, and snow was still there. And
That's
that
a good point.
Bran also being the young lad he is, he had a pony, and his pony was struggling to actually get up there with other horses. That just tells you 9 years of summer, and you still got that much snow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Winterfell
Yeah,
it's a bleak place, man. It's a bleak place. I'd rather live in Dorne myself, but
I
whatever.
can see that. We'll get there one day. That's
Yeah,
Ant
one day.
Kingdom, but yeah, we'll get there one
Yeah.
day.
So they talk about Mercy killing the pups
Hmm.
until John speaks up, and it's really great. This it's really great that like John does what he does because you can tell that like Ned has a little bit of a soft spot for him.
He does.
When he speaks up and he's like, oh, Lord Stark, there's 5 pups, 3 male, 2
Hmm.
female. You have 3 trueborn sons, 2 trueborn daughters.
Yep.
I mean, this is your sigil of your house. Like, you guys are supposed to have these. And he's like, don't you want one, John? And he's like,
I'm not a
Stark.
Stark.
And I read that, it breaks my heart, man. It breaks my heart. Just like this poor fucking guy.
I'm not a Stark. Even when Rob spoke up, even a part to that before when Rob spoke up and it's like, yo, he sounded like he's a true king when he told him you are not going to kill the pup. I think it was
Like when he's
Jacob.
talking to Theon.
Yeah, with Theon, I was like, I'm going to be like, no, you're not. Like just
Yeah.
showing like the authority of like he has it in him, but
Yeah.
John captivates the entire audience and actually
Right.
can get things moving.
Right. Speaking of which, we kind of glossed over the introduction of Theon, but
Yeah.
we got to touch on this because
The guy.
you see very early on
He's a
that
jerk. He's a jerk.
he's a dick. He's
He
just
really
a dick. Even after the guy got beheaded, like they talk about how like Theon
Put his
kicked the
foot
head away.
on the head. Yes.
Yeah, and John even like calls him an ass under his breath.
Mhm.
Like Theon was always a dick. And
Always. Well,
he's
think
always-
about the wordplay you're mentioning. Just foreshadow, but just
Oh
that-
yeah.
Yeah.
Pun intended. Pun intended.
We won't
And-
keep this
and-
as we're not gonna get out too much right now. We want
and
to
if-
get the
and
viewers
if-
to keep reading.
Yeah, we're not going to get into it, but if there are any Theon apologists out there, this might not be the channel for you because
Nah,
that guy. He sucks.
yeah, he definitely. Not else to say that. I'm gonna be nice tonight. So, but even like he wanted to kill the pup like 3 or 4 times, like 3 or
Yeah.
4 times. Like, dude, like it's literally a sigil. Like on top of that, know your role, know your place. You have no authority here.
Right.
You have none at all. And to think that you're going to speak as if like, and Bran, like you said, just cried out as in like, no, don't do it, because Bran is showing he's still a kid, still emotional, and
Right.
looking at his father like he wants things to happen. And you don't pick up on the emotion of that kid wants that wolf, and you're like, let's just kill him.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're an ass.
And I like that. After John says what he does, he kind of he gives in and says, all right, fine, but don't ask when we get back. Don't ask any of the servants to do
Nothing.
anything. Okay, if y'all want these pups, you're gonna have to train them. You're gonna have to feed them.
Yep.
You're gonna have to take care of them. Don't don't bother anyone with this mess. Like, you guys want them, so it'll be your responsibility. Which is
And
also
also
another like good dad move. It's like,
great dad
give
move,
your
'cause it's
kids
showing
give your kids some
responsibility.
responsibility. Yeah.
And it shows to go piggyback off that the direwolf. It said that it was twice the size of the hounds of the
Oh
biggest
yeah.
hound
Yeah.
back home. So it tells you how massive this direwolf is and how like people when they see it, it's like it's been 200 years since we've seen this. That I think the quote was a don't treat them bad. I'm paraphrasing. How a dog can break down a rat, they can tear your arm off.
Yeah. 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 He's like, these are not pets,
Yes,
guys.
they're not.
All right.
Don't treat them bad.
If
It's
y'all
be a
treat them like
problem.
shit, like it's gonna be a problem for a lot of us.
And yes, it's a lot. It's a lot of
It
them.
is a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
It's a lot to deal with. But anyways, while they're leaving, they got their pups and everything like that. John hears another pup, and it's very interesting that John is the only person who hears anything. And
Yes.
here's like the theory time,
Theory
because
time.
we learn later on that John's direwolf ghost
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make any sound.
What
He
does that tell
doesn't
you?
make any sound, right? So that tells you very early on that John's clearly a warg.
Hands down. Like he is like his connection to just everything. And how the first chapter you put John in this. You put the bastard into this whole thing. How he is similar to Ned. How he's able to captivate the entire audience. How he's able to hear things. How he's able to convince others to do stuff. It just tells you who this man
Yeah.
potentially can be.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And another really good kind of like foreshadowing or a little bit of a reference here is they talk about the wolf's coloring being so
Yes.
much different than the other wolves. Like, all the other
Mm-hmm.
wolves are gray, and this one's clearly an albino. It has white fur, red
Mm-hmm.
eyes. It doesn't make any sound, which is weird as hell.
And was able to walk away and still be.
And not only that, Bran made a note of how this was the only pup with its eyes open, while the others
Yes.
were still blind.
Yes. And it tells you a metaphor of him, like how he sees things and how he hears things. Like
Right.
you're look at everything that's going on right now. You has two sons out there right now. Well, one's a bastard. You have the jerk. You have everyone out there. But the person that actually this is a Brand's chapter, but you feel like it's a Jon Snow chapter. Like I'm
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
introducing.
You get a lot of info, a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
about John in this.
It's interesting. Like, yo, who's this guy? I want to know more about him.
Right. And and it's written in a way where, again, John very much embodies like that kind of quote unquote stark honor.
Yes.
So, like, I don't know, I'm reading this and I already am like rooting for this guy, right? And we just met him, right? And it's towards the end when Theon is like, oh, it's an albino, this one will die quicker than the rest of them.
And then the stone look that he gives.
Yeah. And he's like,
What?
I don't think so.
Nah,
This one belongs to me, which is very interesting when you consider the conflict that happens between the Starks and the Crown, and how that goes.
Yeah.
It's just
We're
like,
gonna keep it chapter by chapter, but like when it gets a little spicy later on, a little
yeah,
spicy.
yeah. So, I mean, all in all, it's a short chapter, but there's a lot in here. There's a lot of foreshadowing, a lot
Yes.
of exposition, setting things up for the greater story going forward. But
There's one thing I want to piggyback on top of this, like, and maybe like this, his writing's amazing. So we just got to talking about how we felt that it was kind of like a Jon Snow chapter, right? And then we have Theon. Then we also mentioned how Robb is the potential. He's the heir. He's a future king. You see how Ned he is who he is because of the wisdom he has. But it also shows how Bran is just the guy in the background observing everything and seeing everything.
very observant, very observant.
And that actually plays a part later on in the story as he sees what's going on and he sees what you feel this way, you feel that way. Cool, that's good. But the wisdom that his father puts on him, he potentially becomes that as well.
Right, right, and that's how all the Stark children, like, this is why you root for them later on, right? Because, like,
Mm-hmm.
they come from such a good dude. You know? I mean,
Ah,
is he the most political savvy guy in Westeros?
no, not at all.
No.
No,
No.
he's a
But
guy who he does his job. That's
yeah.
what he is. He does his
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, first chapter after the prologue, it's a great setup. I love that he
Mm-hmm.
started with Bran.
Yeah.
Again, lots of foreshadowing there for the rest of the story. But any other thoughts?
Now I'm looking forward to chapter 3. I'm looking forward to.
I'm looking forward to Catelyn.
I'm gonna call chapter 2. I apologize. Chapter 2, Calvin.
That's fine. I'm looking forward to Catelyn, but I
Mm-hmm.
gotta tell you, I'm one of those people who I don't enjoy Catelyn very much.
But you're also speaking from a person who's seen the conclusion. For the viewers, they don't know why you don't like her. So it's gonna be interesting for them to actually get to know who she is.
That is very true. That's
So they're
very
gonna
true.
look into the
All I
whole
will
thing.
say is this, without spoiling anything. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
Jon is a bastard, right? That means he's Ned Stark's son, but he is not Catelyn's son,
Yes.
and she makes that abundantly clear whenever
Yeah.
she can.
Yeah. You're just that guy that's I don't even want to look at or see or anything.
Yeah, yeah,
But you'll see her views, and I'm not gonna say that you'll be able to agree with her vision of her beliefs, but you need to see that view to understand the full story
oh,
of what
absolutely,
happens later
absolutely,
on.
absolutely. No, I think she's a great character. I just,
Yeah.
you know,
You can care too less. You can care less. Like it's
yeah, yeah,
It's-
yeah. It's
you just-
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. You know what? We'll see you guys next week when we
Yes.
dive into Catelyn 1 in A Game of Thrones. DarRon, it's been a pleasure as always.
always, man. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Yeah, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Take care.